In today's video, we are going to look at Triumph, the British car company that started out in bicycles, moving on to motorcycles, then cars, before going bankrupt to then be bought back for a 40-year period before being killed off by British Leyland during the 1980s. The company was founded by Bettmann, a German immigrant who moved to London in 1884 at 21 years old and set up a business exporting bicycles. Soon after, he started manufacturing his own and marketed them under the Triumph name. By 1902, he had built his first motorcycle. Bettmann became chairman of the Standard Motor Company in 1911. 2 years later, he was elected mayor of Coventry, the first of the city's 559 mayors not to be from Britain. Despite Anglo-German relations at the time, he had become a respected local figure. Triumph had secured plenty of military contracts for its motorcycles during World War I, and they used this financial growth to set up their new Coventry-based factory to start building their first car, the 1020, a small economical car that featured a 1.4-litre four-cylinder engine. Despite being a new car brand, they sold well, and between 1923 and 1926 they sold 2,000 cars. 1927 saw the introduction of Triumph's smaller car, the Super 7. It was built to rival the Austin 7. It was similar in size with an 800cc engine. It was succeeded by the similar Super 8 in 1933, but the 8 only stayed in production for 1 year. Roughly 17,000 of the two models were built during their 8 years on sale. In 1933, Bettmann turned 70, at which point he retired, handing Triumph over to general manager of 14 years, Claude Holbrook. In 1934, Holbrook decided to take Triumph up market with the Dolomite. They used the Alfa Romeo 8C from the time as inspiration, developing their own 2-litre straight 8 supercharged engine. The problem was that the Triumph badge couldn't compete with cars like Alfa Romeo, and the car cost £1,225, the equivalent to £74,000 in today's money. They had built 3 within the first year and couldn't sell any of them. The project had cost them a total of £250,000, the equivalent to £15 million in today's money. In 1936, to raise cash to continue building cars, Triumph sold off its motorbike division. From 1935 to 1939, Triumph only sold the one car, the Gloria. Despite selling its bike division, finances never regained and Triumph closed its doors. In 1944, the Standard Motor Company bought rights to the Triumph name and bought its factory that had been damaged in the war during the Coventry Blitz. Standard had grown significantly during the 1930s, and by the time it had bought Triumph, it was one of the biggest car manufacturers in the UK, and its managing director, Sir John Black, had been knighted in 1943 for his wartime efforts. Sir John Black wanted to use Standard's production line and its own engines with its own new design bodies that would see Triumph marketed above Standard's existing model range. In 1946, Triumph starts producing its first post-World War model, the 1800 Town and Country. It was released with a design that had been inspired by Rolls-Royce. The same year saw the launch of Triumph's first sports car-inspired model, the Roadster. It had a slightly dated design. It was also the last ever series production car to be fitted with a dicky seat. During the late 1940s, Triumph was struggling to make an impact on the hugely important American market. It was plotting a new sports model, something that would sit between MG and Jaguar cars of the time. In 1953, Triumph launched the TR2, a 2-litre, 2-seat sports car capable of 105 miles an hour. The car was a success, selling 8,500 units in just over 2 years. An updated model, named the TR3, followed, and it was Triumph's most successful model to date, selling over 58,000 in 6 years. 1959 saw Triumph release the first edition Herald, one of its best-known models, a much smaller and cheaper car than Triumph's other recent models. It was hugely advanced for its age, with all-round independent suspension and compact 4-cylinder engine. It sold over 100,000 in 2 years. However, Triumph soon hits more financial issues, and in 1962, Leyland takes over and sees Triumph return to profit. In 1964, the Standard Motor Company is discontinued. In 1967, the TR5 is released, the first of the TR models not to have a 4-cylinder engine. The V6 is good for 120 miles an hour. In 1968, Leyland merges with the British Motor Corporation. It was struggling, with the government pressuring it to merge, becoming the British Leyland Motor Corporation, bringing Britain's biggest marques under the same control. 1969 sees the launch of the Triumph TR6. It had German styling, it was very popular, with 95,000 models being built up to 1976. In 1970, Triumph launches the Stag. It was not very successful though, it had a bad reputation for poor reliability. In 1972, Triumph launches the Dolomite. It featured engines, gearbox and a front-wheel drive arrangement that had been co-developed with Saab. This joint project had succeeded the British Leyland Motor Corporation merger, meaning that the Dolomite, despite being front-wheel drive, it offered something unique from the other British brands that were under British Leyland Motor Corporation control at the time. In top spec Dolomite sprint form, its 2-litre 4-cylinder developed 127 horsepower and it was good for 115 miles an hour. In 1975, the British Leyland Motor Corporation goes bankrupt. It's nationalised and renamed to British Leyland. In 1975, Triumph launches the TR7. The controversial, wedge-shaped design, it came as coupe only at first. However, the TR7 was hit hard by strikes during the late 1970s, with production being moved to the Rover Solihull plant in 1980. The same year, they built the TR8, with the Rover V8 for the United States only. They only built 2,800 of these. The TR7 itself was Triumph's most successful TR model, with 111,000 being built until 1981. In 1981, Triumph launched the Acclaim. It was simply a rebadged Honda Acclaim. It only stayed in production until 1984, and it was the last ever Triumph. It was rebadged as the Rover 200 in 1984. This marked the end of Triumph, despite it being one of Britain's most important brands during the 1970s.